Hey guys, Tegan here, episode 3 of Learning to Kite. In this episode, we're going to be talking gear. This can be a somewhat intimidating process because there's a lot to take into account, but hopefully this should steer you in the right direction and give you a good understanding of what gear you'll need and what sizes of gear you'll need for your weight, your size, and the wind strength in your area. So we'll start off with the harness. So the purpose of the harness is this is what the kite attaches to, and this takes most of the pull of the kite and is arguably probably the most important aspect of your gear. You get two types of harnesses. Number one is a waist harness, which goes around the abdomen area. As you can see there, goes around the abdomen area. Then you have a seat harness that goes around your leg area, similar to a climbing harness. And this is the ideal harness for beginners because when you're a beginner, your kite will be flying up above you most of the time. Therefore, that pull is kind of a vertical pull most of the time. And if you use a waist harness, it can start pulling the harness up your abdomen. So as you can see here, if we've got this clipped on, I'm not going to clip it on now, but if the kite's pulling up, it does pull up on you quite a lot if you're learning with a waist harness. So that's completely up to you. My first harness was a waist harness. So if you're happy to have that, vertical pull on a waist harness, it will save you money in terms of, buying a seat harness, learning, and then buying a waist harness afterwards. So that's completely up to you. In terms of the size ranges for harnesses, obviously that's completely dependent on your size. If you go onto, let's say, a harness website for a brand that obviously sells harnesses, you'll find a size chart, and that'll give you a good idea of what size harness you need for your waist diameter. Another aspect to take into account is that these two pieces here are sold separate. So the harness itself is sold as one piece, and then this second piece here, which is the hook, this is called the spreader bar. This is sold separate to the harness itself. So that's just something to take into account whether you're buying a new harness or you're buying a second-hand harness. Then one last thing I need to mention with regards to the harness is your safety leash, which is another aspect that you'll need to buy that again doesn't come with your harness. So this little safety leash there, that connects to the safety line on your bar, which is what I'll explain in a second. So essentially on the harness, there are three pieces: the harness itself, the spreader bar, and the safety leash. Then just going into how a harness fits on you in the first place. So this is obviously a waist harness. I don't have a seat harness to show you, but the harness itself has a Velcro pad or Velcro strip over here that you stick around your waist first, and then you push your spreader bar in place and then lock that spreader bar in place with whatever feature your harness has. So as you can see there, that harness locks in place like that. And again, obviously your kite or your bar will hook to this hook over here. Then the second aspect of the gear is the bar. So the bar is obviously what connects the harness to the kite, and it's how you steer the kite and handle the power of the kite. So this piece here is how you connect the bar to the harness, and it's called the chicken loop. So that is called the chicken loop there. This is called the chicken stick or the donkey dick, as people sometimes refer to it. Now, how this fits to the harness itself, you have your chicken loop, you have your hook, and you would move your chicken finger out of the way, put the loop over the hook, and then push your chicken finger underneath. So through the hook, underneath your chicken loop like that. And it'll obviously keep the chicken loop from falling off the hook itself. Then the next thing to mention on the bar is the safety leash attachment. So you'll have some sort of other attachment like this here. That little loop is where you put or clip your safety leash to, and that'll connect to the kite safety, or safety line, which I'll explain in a second. One thing to note, if you ever feel in trouble or you can't handle the kite, there is a safety system on the kite that disables the power of the kite while still keeping the kite attached to you, and that is this system here. So this red piece here, as you can see here, if I got my chicken loop attached to my harness and I pull this red thing forward, it disables the chicken loop, and this would immediately disable the kite from me. So that is the most crucial part of learning to kite. Don't be afraid to pull your safety if you feel in trouble or you are in trouble and you're getting dragged along the beach. Pull your safety, that'll immediately flag the kite out, and then you can obviously gather yourself from there. Then just for reference, to put that clip back in, just push that back in. You sometimes have to lift that red piece back up, and then clip that back in place. Obviously that will put that chicken loop back in place. Then the next piece of the bar is called the trim system, and this is how you power up or depower your kite by pulling this trim in and out. Then the final aspect to mention on the bar is that the bar has 4 lines. So 2 outer lines that are connected straight to the bar itself, and these are the steering lines. These are used to steer the kite as well as increase or decrease the power of the kite based on how far you pull in, or it's called sheet out the bar. The 2 center lines, these are called the power lines, and these are connected directly to the harness and are responsible for holding the majority of the pull of the kite itself. Then the third aspect in terms of gear is the kite itself. So as I mentioned in previous videos, the kite is inflated using a pump, and it's obviously got an inflatable frame that keeps the structure of the kite, allowing it to be relaunched from the water if it's crashed, with a canopy made of strong material. Then just like I mentioned, the bar has 4 lines, the kite has 4 line attachment points. So the 2 center lines are attached to the bridle system of the kite, and this is what bears most of the power of the kite. And then the 2 end lines, or the corner lines on the ends of the kite, those are the steering line attachments, and that's obviously how the kite is steered. Then in terms of kite sizes, this is completely dependent on where you are in the world as well as your weight and size. So I've put a basic kite size calculator on the screen now. You can pause the video and have a look and see roughly what size kite you'll need in terms of your weight. Now in terms of determining the wind strength of your area, you can, if you have a local kite store, you can phone them and ask them for recommendations. If for whatever reason you don't have a local kite store, like I don't, you can use an app called Wind Guru. I've got a link in the description below. I'm not associated with them in any way, obviously. It's just by far the best kiting app or wind app in my opinion. How this is read, just a quick introduction. So this row is what the average wind strength is, and in this row is what the max wind strength is. Wind strength is measured in knots. Wind Guru refers to knots. So let's say the wind strength is 20 knots. You would kind of take that value as your wind strength number when calculating your kite size. Usually for beginners, this ranges anywhere between 8 and 10 square meters. Just for reference, kite sizes are referred to in square meterage, and this can range anywhere from 5 square meters to 14 square meters. Then in terms of the kite design that you want to buy as a beginner, this is kind of a whole different rabbit hole to go down, so I'm not going to go through this in this video. I'll try and link a video in the description below where I go through the ideal characteristics of a good beginner kite. But just off the top of my head, the Cabrini Switchblade is a very good beginner kite. The North Reach is also a very good beginner kite. And I'd say the Nash Pivot is also a good beginner kite as well, probably on the more advanced side. Ideally, you want to go with the Cabrini Switchblade or the North Reach. Then the next thing is the pump. So given that the kite is inflatable, you're going to need to inflate that kite with a pump. One key thing to note with the pump is the connector that you have. So usually the pumps will come with a whole bunch of connectors to suit a whole different range of kites. And usually the kite itself comes with the specific connector that connects the pump to the kite. But just when you're buying your gear set, ensure that you have this piece. Otherwise, you're obviously not going to be able to pump your kite up. So that's everything I think on the kite side. The last area to touch on is the board. So this is not a crucial aspect in the early stages. The main concept to put across here is that ideally when you're learning, you want a bigger board. Bigger boards plane on the water, and you're able to ride a lot easier with a bigger board when you're learning, but the sizes really don't matter too much. How the sizes are measured is in width and length. This is measured, or it'll say it on the board itself. I'm not sure if you can see that there, but this is a, what is this? This is a 135 by 41.5. So what that is basically referring to is that this board is 135 centimeters in length and then 41.5 centimeters in width. Then the other 2 aspects to mention on a board are, number 1, the foot straps. So obviously you put your feet in there, the handle, and then the fins on the bottom. Those are just some things to take into account when buying a board, and just to ensure that when you buy a board, let's say secondhand, it comes with, or you're able to get parts for it, being the fins and the bindings they're called, or the foot straps. Obviously that's where you put your feet in on the board. And then ideally you want a handle. Obviously that's not essential, but ideally you want a handle. It just makes it a lot easier to handle your board on the beach. So that's everything I wanted to mention on the gear side. Obviously there are other aspects, so the impact vest, the helmet, the earplugs, wetsuits, etc. But just from a bare minimum perspective, obviously it's those 5 key things: kite, pump, bar, harness, and board. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you like this, give it a like, subscribe, and stay keen for the next one. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.